to rain fire down on a seat that raised my banner.
You! Go them!
Does he mean to somehow win their support?
And quietly, you must presume these men hold allegiance only to themselves.
You river folk?
I fucking hate.
The war for the Iron Throne was supposed to be over. Rhaenyra Targaryen sat on the throne her father always promised her. Her enemies had knelt. The Hightower army had bent the knee. Daemon had dragons flanking him in the field, and the Greens had nowhere left to run. It looked for just one brief shining moment, like the Black Queen had actually won. And then Ormund Hightower pulled off the greatest betrayal in the history of this entire war. And everything Rhaenyra thought she had secured came crashing down around her. That is exactly where we are heading into Episode 4 of House of the Dragon Season 3. And if the trailer that HBO dropped on July 5th is any indication, what is coming next week is going to be one of the most brutal and consequential episodes this show has ever produced. So let us break down every single thing you need to know: the context, the betrayal, the location, the characters, the trailer details, and what Fire and Blood tells us could happen, before Episode 4 drops on July 12, 2026 on HBO and HBO Max. Setting the stage. Where Season 3 has brought us. To understand why Episode 4 matters so much, you have to understand how Season 3 has been building its story from the very first episode. The season opened with the Battle of the Gullet, the devastating naval confrontation that cost Rhaenyra her eldest son Jacaerys Velaryon. Jace, the boy who had sailed to Driftmark and secured the alliance with the Velaryons, the young man who rode Vermax and believed in his mother's cause more than anyone. He died in that battle, killed in circumstances made all the more tragic by the actions of his own cousin Rhaena, who rode the wild and barely tamed dragon Sheepstealer into the battle without control and accidentally caused devastation among the Black forces. That opening episode set the tone immediately. This season was not going to let anyone feel comfortable. Dragons are not solutions. They are catastrophes waiting to happen. And the show made that clear from the very beginning of Season 3. Episode 2, titled Queen's Landing, moved the story into the political consequences of Rhaenyra finally taking King's Landing and the Iron Throne itself. Alicent Hightower, in one of the most complex moments of the season so far, risked everything to help Rhaenyra take the city without a massacre, ordering the archers and trebuchet operators to stand down, sending Aemond out of the city and keeping her word. And yet Rhaenyra, rather than finding peace, found a throne that cuts. Not just literally, but politically, psychologically, and spiritually. The gold was gone. The coffers were empty. Nobody knew where it went, with Tywin Lannister presumed dead after the Gullet and his brother Jason already killed by the Winterwolves before that. The city was starving. The common folk needed food. The nobles needed managing. The High Septon refused to anoint her as rightful queen because he could not confirm Aegon's death and because the Faith of the Seven has never had much love for dragonfire or blood magic or, as the show implies, women in positions of supreme power. And through all of this, Rhaenyra was supposed to hold herself together and be the queen the realm needed. Episode 3, titled Rhaenyra Triumphant. And the title is deeply ironic, showed a woman cracking at the seams. She was pale, sweaty, agitated, hallucinating her dead son Jacaerys walking the halls of the Red Keep. She was trying to rule a city that did not fully accept her, trying to manage allies who wanted things from her she was not willing to give, trying to hold together a coalition that was fraying before her eyes. She knighted her dragon seeds, Ulf the White, Hugh the Hammer and Adam, but refused to give Adam the Velaryon name, which became the breaking point for Lord Corlys. The Sea Snake had given everything to Rhaenyra's cause. He had treated her sons as his legitimate grandsons for years, despite the whispers and the obvious truth that they were Harwin Strong's children, not Laena's. He had held the line at Driftmark. He had brought his fleet. He had sacrificed. And when he asked Rhaenyra to officially legitimize Adam and Alan as his sons and heirs, one simple act of political reciprocity, she refused, citing the complications it would create around the legitimacy questions surrounding her own children. Corlys snapped. In front of witnesses in the halls of the Red Keep, he called Rhaenyra's sons bastards to her face. It was explosive, devastating, and entirely earned by the storytelling. And it left the alliance between House Targaryen and House Velaryon on incredibly fragile ground at exactly the moment Rhaenyra could least afford it. Meanwhile, at the start of Episode 3, Daemon had ridden out with Hugh the Hammer and Ulf the White to demand surrender from the Hightower army. He told Ormund Hightower that Otto was dead, that Aegon was gone, that Aemond had vanished, essentially telling the Hightower Lord that the war was finished and the Greens had nothing left to fight for. Ormond, presented with dragons in the field and no good options, did kneel. He pledged fealty. He agreed to disband. But Daemon wanted Daeron Targaryen as well, the young Targaryen prince who still rode to Sarion, the dragon known as the Blue Queen, and who represented the last legitimate claimant who could rally the Greens. Ormond could not deliver Daeron, or so he claimed, and instead handed over what turned out to be a bleach-blonde tween stand-in, a decoy boy, while smuggling the real Daeron away to safety. It was cunning, cold-blooded, and exactly the kind of move you would expect from a lord who had no intention of truly surrendering. And by the end of episode 3, the full scope of Ormond's betrayal became clear when a soot-covered man stumbled to the gates of the Red Keep with terrible news. Ormund Hightower and his army had seized Tumbleton. Tumbleton. Why this location changes everything. To understand why the seizure of Tumbleton is such a devastating blow to Rhaenyra, you have to understand what this town is and where it sits on the map of Westeros. Tumbleton is a thriving market town, described in George R.R. Martin's Fire and Blood as a busy and prosperous settlement that serves as the seat of House Footley. It sits roughly 150 miles southwest of King's Landing, at the very start of the Mander River, which flows through the heart of the Reach. And that geographical position is everything. Tumbleton is not just a town. It is the last major settlement standing between the Hightower army and King's Landing itself. If Ormund Hightower holds Tumbleton, he has a staging post, a supply base, and a psychological foothold on the road to the capital. He is no longer a defeated army in the field being offered clemency. He is an occupying force with a hostage population, with Daeron's dragon Tessarion behind the walls, and with a clear declaration of intent. He is telling Rhaenyra and everyone watching that the war is not over. The Greens are not finished. And he is doing it from a position that Rhaenyra cannot simply burn him out of without massacring innocent civilians who live in a town that, as she herself states in the trailer, raised her banner and supported her cause. That is the genius and the cruelty of Ormond's move. He did not just seize a militarily useful location. He seized a location that turns Rhaenyra's own moral commitments against her. She cannot unleash Dragonfire on Tumbleton without killing the very common folk she has been publicly claiming to champion. The people she walked among in King's Landing, the people she fed when the nobles were hoarding food, the people whose cause she has used to define the righteousness of her claim. The moment she burns Tumbleton, she burns her own story about who she is and what kind of queen she intends to be. And this dilemma is going to be at the very heart of episode 4. In the trailer, we hear her ask the question directly. Why seize Tumbleton? He dares me to rain fire down on a seat that raised my banner. She understands the trap. The question is whether she has the political and strategic intelligence to find a way out of it, or whether the pressure, the grief, the isolation, and the creeping darkness we have been watching build inside her since episode 1 will push her toward a choice she cannot take back. The episode 4 trailer. Every key detail broken down. The preview that HBO released on July 5th after episode 3 aired gives us significant information about what is coming in episode 4, written by David Hancock and directed by Claire Kilner. The episode marks the halfway point of season 3's 8-episode run, and given how aggressively the show has been moving through its storylines, the expectation is that this episode could contain some of the most explosive sequences of the season. Rhaenyra's opening line in the trailer frames everything. She is questioning Ormond's strategy, not from a position of confidence, but from a position of genuine confusion and alarm. She recognizes that Tumbleton is a trap, that seizing it was a deliberate provocation designed to force her hand. What she does not yet know is the full extent of what Ormond has planned for that town and its people. The trailer shows the Hightower army in formation, organized and disciplined, a visual reminder that despite the setbacks the Greens have suffered, they still have a serious military force in the field under a capable commander. And they have Tessarion. They have a dragon. Which means whatever Rhaenyra decides to do about Tumbleton, it is not going to be simple. Daemon Targaryen appears in the trailer dealing with a problem that has been simmering since episode 2 money. The Black Forces are not being paid. The treasury is empty. And an unpaid army is not an army for long. Daemon says in the trailer, our soldiers need to be paid, else there will be bedlam. This is a crucial detail because it speaks to the structural rot underneath Rhaenyra's apparent victory. She sits the Iron Throne, but she sits it over a city with no gold, a divided small council, a hostile high septon, and now an enemy army at the gates of a hostage town. The splendor of the throne means nothing if she cannot pay the men who are supposed to defend it. Larys Strong, the clubfoot master of whispers and one of the most dangerous men in Westeros, appears in the trailer counseling extreme caution. He advises in the preview that they must be very careful about who they trust among their allies, warning that many of the men around Rhaenyra hold their allegiance only to themselves. This is a man who has survived the deaths of his own father, his brother, and multiple political regimes by being the most careful and calculating person in any room he enters. When Larys Strong tells you to trust no one, you listen. His presence in the trailer signals that the internal political threat to Rhaenyra is growing, not shrinking, even as the external military threat from Tumbleton dominates the headlines. Ormund Hightower, played by Freddie Fox, the brother of Alicent Hightower and uncle to the Targaryen princes, appears in the trailer searching for Aemond. He is shown demanding information about the prince's whereabouts, saying clearly, "We seek the Prince Aemond. If you know where he is, I'd advise you to be forthcoming." This confirms that Criston Cole and Gwaine have reached Harrenhal, as had been anticipated. But they are going to find a very different situation than they expected. Aemond is not there, at least not in the way they planned. The last we saw of Aemond in the show, he had been stabbed and was on the floor of Harrenhal, begging the mysterious Alice Rivers to help him. He is alive but barely, and his current fate remains one of the biggest unanswered questions hanging over the entire season. When Criston and Gwaine arrive at Harrenhal and find Alice Rivers but no Aemond, the conversation that follows is going to be very interesting indeed. Alice Rivers is not a character who gives straightforward answers, and the show has been using her almost as a supernatural presence in Aemond's storyline. The woman who sees things, who seems to inhabit Harrenhal with the same dark energy the castle itself has carried since it was first built. Ormund Hightower himself delivers the most chilling moment of the entire trailer. He is shown making his intentions explicit, declaring, "My purpose is to restore the rightful line to the Iron Throne. It is the will of the gods." This is not the language of a man who bent the knee and changed his mind. This is a true believer. Ormond is not doing this for political advantage or personal survival. He is doing it because he genuinely believes that Aegon II is the rightful king, and that Rhaenyra is a usurper, regardless of what her father said or what her dragons can do. That kind of conviction is more dangerous than mere ambition, because you cannot negotiate with it, you cannot buy it off, and you cannot shame it into submission. And the trailer closes with a shot of Ormond apparently burning someone alive. An image of deliberate brutality that tells you exactly what he is prepared to do to make his point. The missing pieces: Aemond, Rhaenyra, and the deeper chess board. Episode 4 is going to have to manage several storylines simultaneously, and understanding each of them is essential for grasping the full picture of what this episode is setting up. Aemond Targaryen and Vhagar, the largest living dragon in the world, the dragon that killed Lucerys Velaryon in Season 2, and has been the single greatest military threat the Greens possess, have been strangely quiet in Season 3. Aemond was stabbed and has been recovering at Harrenhal under Alice Rivers' care. Vhagar has been unaccounted for. When Criston Cole and Ormund Hightower arrive at Harrenhal looking for the prince, they are going to find answers, but those answers may not be what anyone wants to hear. Aemond recovering, potentially plotting, potentially moving independently of any orders from King's Landing or Ormond's army, is an enormous wild card. A recovered Aemond on Vhagar is arguably more dangerous to Rhaenyra than an entire army at Tumbleton. Rhaenyra Targaryen's story is also far from resolved. She has been hiding after the catastrophe at the Battle of the Gullet, where riding sheepstealer without proper control led to terrible unintended consequences, including the indirect death of her cousin Jacaerys. The show has given Rhaenyra's storyline elements that in the source material Fire and Blood belong to a different character, a wildling dragonseed girl named Nettles, and how that plays out is one of the more intriguing departures from the book the show has committed to. Rhaenyra has a dragon she can barely control, she carries enormous guilt, and she is a Targaryen who has been largely kept on the margins of the main conflict. Episode May 4th begin to resolve where her story is heading, because you cannot keep a character in hiding forever when the war is escalating this dramatically. The financial crisis Daemon mentions in the trailer is also directly connected to the larger strategic picture. Rhaenyra won King's Landing but inherited an empty treasury. The gold is gone and nobody knows who took it or where it went. Without money to pay soldiers, discipline breaks down. Without discipline, the army that is supposed to protect her reign becomes a liability. And in the context of the Dance of the Dragons, an unpaid army has historically been a very dangerous thing. Soldiers with no wages and no loyalty become mercenaries, and mercenaries go where the gold is. If Ormund Hightower is quietly redistributing what he has taken from Tumbleton to buy loyalty from wavering captains, Rhaenyra could find herself losing forces she thought were secure without a single dragon being deployed against her. What Fire and Blood tells us, without spoiling everything. George R.R. Martin's source novel Fire and Blood covers the historical account of the Dance of the Dragons in great detail, and the Battle of Tumbleton is one of the most significant events in that entire war. Without laying out specific plot outcomes that would spoil the episode for those who have not read the book, it is worth saying that what happens at Tumbleton in the source material is shocking, brutal, and involves a level of betrayal that cuts to the very heart of who the dragon seeds are, and where their loyalties truly lie.